Please state your name after the tone, followed by the pound sign. Thank you. The host has muted the conference. Your line is automatically muted.
Our presenters for today. Following the presentation, all participants will receive an email from us providing them access to today's presentation. And lastly, throughout the presentation, you will receive a series of survey questions to assist us in guiding today's discussion. Please take a moment to complete so we can have a relevant and engaging conversation with our guest presenters. Well, with those logistics behind us, good afternoon, and thank you for attending today's webinar, The Commonwealth of Kentucky's Approach to Implementing an eTranscript Solution to Achieve Student Success and Access Goals. During today's presentation, we will cover a number of areas, from reasons to adopt, to the K-12 and post-secondary partnership forge, to innovative tactics to address the needs of multiple stakeholders. If you have a moment, you'll probably have received your first survey question. Please let us know what's greatest interest for you for today's discussion. While you do that, it is my pleasure today to introduce our guest speaker, Ms. Dede Connor. Dede is the Director of Division of Enterprise Data at the Kentucky Department of Education. In other words, for all of us in state government, Dede is the Chief Data Officer for the KDE. From data governance to Kentucky Student Information Systems to instructional management systems to federal reporting, and is the agency's P20 program manager. Dede manages and leads a number of successful initiatives, and we're excited to have her as our lead presenter. Also, her previous experience includes working in other areas of education and workforce in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Also, joining and supporting her today is Mr. Elias Ferdosi, Parchment's Director of Statewide Initiatives. With over a decade of serving the education community, El will be supporting Dede in today's discussion and also will be answering a number of questions that you will be presenting to us. With those introductions completed, today's agenda is a simple one. Not only covering the background of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, what is their environment, but just as important, the initiative, its overview, and how are they able to roll it out successfully to a diverse group of students, counselors, and institutions, both public and private. With those introductions completed along with the agenda, I welcome our guest speaker, Dede. And Dede, I'm going to transition the spotlight to you as today's participants want to hear from you and less from me.
Well, thank you, Lynn. I appreciate the invitation by both Elle and Lynn to participate today in today's call. I think as we go through this presentation, you'll find that this project is near and dear to my heart. So it's been a good project and something I'm glad to share with all those that are participating today. So just to kind of start off by providing you a little bit of background on Kentucky. Kentucky has 173 school districts. We have about 400 public high school, and that does include alternative schools. Within the Commonwealth, we have 44 colleges and universities, and those are both public and private colleges. And we are very good at doing statewide initiatives. We have a number of statewide initiatives. We have a statewide network, a statewide email system. We have an instructional management system. We have the student information system, which is Infinite Campus is our product for that. So a common transcript and a transcript process did align well with Kentucky standards, especially since the Parchment solution was already fully integrated with Infinite Campus, who is our statewide provider for our student information system. So as Kentucky looked at the process for adopting Parchment, we looked at this as being a statewide process from the very beginning. We started off, I was about 4 months into my position as with the Kentucky Department of Education, and just happened to be in a presentation that Parchment was delivering at an Infinite Campus training. And the discussion there was about transcripts and just being part of the crowd and listening at the high schools, there was a lot of interest. And really, I can remember sitting there and thinking, wow, this really makes more sense to do this statewide than it does district by district, so that we could move forward with something that was a standard process for post-secondaries. I had worked with the post-secondaries before, so I kind of had that mindset along with the high school mindset. So really looking at the enthusiasm we saw there, we felt like this product and the solution was very desirable. I started looking into it and found that Kentucky really already had an electronic transcript process that hadn't been fully automated. It had been fully automated, but it hadn't been fully adopted. It was something that another agency, one of our other education partners, had offered, and it really had just never taken off. So, kind of had to stop back and say, okay, we had to explore our options and why that had not gone forward, and look at the pros and cons of the solutions that we had in place and what Parchment had to offer. But even though it made sense, it wasn't something we moved forward on immediately. It was something that it took a little time to get going. And honestly, it was one of those things where we just really had a lot going on, and it wasn't something we jumped on immediately. So really, it kept it in the back of my mind, but the need for the solution kind of became personal when my daughter started doing transcripts, and I'm finding that the process for her was really the same process it was for me 30 years previously. Yes, I just dated myself, but the only exception was that now the student had to go back into the guidance counselor's office and pick up an envelope that was sealed with no address on it and had to mail it themselves. So that was really the only real change I saw from when I graduated. So in talking internally, and fortunately we have a great CIO here, David Couch, and talking to him, he was experiencing the same thing with his son that was graduating the same year. And this really just made sense. It was an easy sell here in Kentucky. I recommended that we explore the solution offered by Parchment through Infinite Campus to automate the transcript process, and I got the go-ahead, and it really was kind of it didn't align with, it aligned with some of our other priorities, but it wasn't one of our priorities, so it just really became work that we took on with just a few of us. So just kind of giving you some additional information on this, we really had to look at the fact that were we going to have the support we needed to make this really happen? Again, we didn't have a lot of time. It wasn't something that we wanted to take on if nobody was really interested in it. So just because a couple of us thought it was a good idea, it wasn't enough for us to move forward full steam ahead. A new transcript process, again, wasn't on our priorities, but it did align well with our other priorities. For example, college and career readiness. We felt like we could make a case for it to align with that initiative. I had to go ahead internally to explore, but needed to know if the other Kentucky education agencies would be on board. So good, it was important for the Kentucky post-secondary schools to be on board, since many of our Kentucky students went to in-state colleges. We're at about a 90% rate for those students that go on to college. They stay in-state for the most part. So that's why it was so important here in Kentucky. We knew if the high schools had to support multiple processes, they were still having to print transcripts for some schools and go electronic with others, we would have a harder time to adopting those. So we really had to get more confidence in their ability to make the post-secondary side of it work. We always find changes hard, and getting everybody to make the change and see the benefits was an important part of this project. The reaction of the high schools that participated in the original Parchment training session made me confident of that they would be supportive of this. But what I didn't have was the post-secondary contact. So what I did was I picked up the phone and I started calling some of the universities, and just until I got the right person. And it depends on who you talk to. Some people would say I went about it all the wrong way because I didn't start at the provost or the leadership level and it go down. When I was meeting with the universities, a couple of weeks ago, I told them that. I said, I've heard that I did this all the wrong way, and they said, no, you actually did that the right way, because I really made it a grassroots effort. I found the people that were dealing with transcripts to see if that was something that they felt like would be beneficial in their shops. And we dealt with the admissions areas and those that are working with transcripts and to find that. So the first thing we did is we got people that were interested from the universities to participate in a webcast that Parchment did to kind of go over what the product offered and what it could do for the transcript process in Kentucky. So that's where we started with it. We had that call, and we had 3 universities on that call, and they stayed with us the whole way through the project. They became our pilot universities, and they were very enthusiastic about the process. They felt like it was a good thing. They really felt like it was something they'd like to move forward with. They didn't see initially that they would be able to go with the fully electronic process just because of other priorities in their own schools, but they felt like moving forward with it, even with the PDF solution, was something that would be a good step forward for them. So what we did is, after those conversations with the post-secondary schools and actually talking to some additional high schools, we really came up with a list of pros and cons for all solutions, the existing electronic process, our paper process, and the Parchment solution. And we use that as talking points. At that point, I really needed to get involvement from the other Kentucky agencies, one of which I mentioned already had a transcript process. So I really wanted their buy-in, because I didn't want to add a new solution. I didn't want to add another solution. I wanted to add a new solution and see that one go away since it hadn't been completely adopted in the state. And then we worked with our post-secondary group, our Council for Post-Secondary Education, to get their involvement on that and get their participation, because it was so important that we would get the post-secondary schools on board. We wanted their help in making that happen.
Dede, I have a few questions, if that's okay, if I can ask you. There is a question that someone asked from the previous slide. They asked, did they understand correctly that Kentucky has one SIS provider for all K-12 institutions? If so, who is that provider? And it seems like that was part of your decision to select the Parchment as your vendor.
Right. We do have a single student information system statewide. It is Infinite Campus. And it happened to be one of the systems that Parchment had a relationship with, and the integration was already there, so that was very attractive to us.
And something that you mentioned on, talking about your grassroots action and working with the post-secondary institutions, one of the things that you mentioned was that 3 universities saw the benefit. Were all 3 universities the same type? Were they all state universities, or was it a mix between public and private universities? How did you select them?
Initially, it was who I could reach initially, and the 3 that we started with were the largest universities in the state. We wanted to get their buy-in, and then we went out to the community and technical system and got their involvement. My next kind of process is in my discussion is how we reached out to our Council on Post-Secondary Education. Once we got them involved and on board, they really took the post-secondary outreach from there. They were able to reach out to all the post-secondary schools through their own distribution list and invite those schools to come in and participate in WebExes to see the advantages of the electronic tool. So we really had a larger participation, but we did start with the 3 universities that were all the same type and just happened to be the largest ones in the state.
And one final question for you. You talked about the partnership with other state organizations, from the Council of Post-Secondary Education to then also the Kentucky Higher Education Assistance Authority. Whether, did those other agencies, KIA, or if there was potentially another, did they also assist you with the outreach, or the outreach was still primarily in your office with this grassroots action?
Initially, it was all in our office, and even once they got involved, we took the lead role on a lot. But when it came to the post-secondary outreach, the Council for Post-Secondary Education did that. Kia was
Great,
also
thank you.
involved, but they did not do the outreach. They really reach out to the same group of people that KDE does, and so we felt like having Kentucky Department of Education reach out to the schools made more sense than Kia doing it. Any other questions?
There is. There's one more. The question again is associated with the one student information system. And the question is, does that include the private K-12 schools and also your charter schools within the state of Kentucky?
First, Kentucky doesn't have any charter schools. That legislation has not passed in Kentucky, although we've tried a few times. But the private schools do have an opportunity to participate in the eTranscript solution, but they do not utilize the state student information system.
Great, thank you. And that concludes the questions as it relates to what I have so far.
Okay, great. So what we did is we really had a series of webcasts, and to get all these schools involved and get that interest moving. When we started thinking about post-secondary schools, and because some of the schools had said that they weren't ready to go to a fully electronic process, we knew we had to make sure we had something in it for the post-secondary schools to see the benefit. You know, pulling the information down from a system versus getting that many pieces of mail was a good thing. However, they had co-op students working in there opening mail for them and they were going to have somebody go in and download the file. So, you know, they saw that as a positive, but we didn't want that to be the only selling point. So we really looked at the common transcript. We really wanted one solution. What we had is we had one student information system across the state, but within the state, we had 173 different transcripts. And some districts had more than one transcript, even in one school. So from the post-secondary side, it made it difficult for them to actually just find the information that they were interested in on the transcript in different locations and putting it into their system. So it wasn't something that the common transcript was extremely important to them. So, you know, I mentioned earlier that Kentucky opted not to go with it fully electronic, the XML file initially, and that was of interest to the Kentucky schools. The post-secondary schools still want that, but what we did is just we built a foundation to build upon. So we took it at that level because it was the opportunity to move the project forward. Yes, it was less costly too, and when we get back to the funding piece of it, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the immediate win for the post-secondary schools was the common transcript. So we really wanted to make sure that it met their needs. So what we did is we began by comparing the transcripts of participating pilot schools. We had 15 pilot high schools that worked with us, and they were volunteers across the state. A variety of sizes and geographic locations. But we started looking at all their transcripts and compared, and there were a lot of similarities. We went back and forth with the high schools and the post-secondary schools on what they needed and what had to be on there. But ultimately, we came up with a transcript that met the needs of the post-secondary schools. At this point, we only have two optional fields. One of those is the class rank, and the second one is the ACT scores. So other than that, everything's the same statewide. So post-secondary schools are already seeing the benefit of having a standard transcript. They really look forward to the additional efficiencies that the paperless process will bring to automating their transcript load into their system. We just don't happen to be there in the project yet.
Dede, this is Len. As it relates to the common transcript, you know, this is something we hear from a number of state officers. For some, it's just a dream. What was the biggest obstacle you faced when presenting this to your districts, or were most of them on board?
Most of them were on board. I didn't get a lot of any pushback on it. Of course, they liked their transcript. They liked the fact that they were able to tailor it to be exactly what they wanted to be, and there was a little bit more ability to customize within Infinite Campus than they were going to have with the Parchment solution. So we were taking, their branding off of it and things like that, because we were making it a statewide transcript versus individual district type of transcript. So there were some concerns initially, but I really did not get a lot of concerns with moving to a transcript process except class rank. That was one that there was a lot of feelings one way or the other, that it should be on there or it shouldn't be on there. So ultimately we just allowed that to be optional. And really that feeling came from the high schools, not so much from the post-secondary schools. Post-secondary schools, the ones that I spoke to didn't seem to care one way or the other. It wasn't a field that they relied on heavily.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and the other thing that we had to think about was the ACT, and a lot of that came into the direction we were receiving from ACT on what scores could be used and what scores couldn't be used on a statewide transcript. So there's some complexities there that left us leaving that as optional too. And we are a statewide ACT state, so that may be different than from other states. So really from there, we had their interest was confirmed from post-secondary and high schools. It really came down to selling the idea. If you can remember, this was not a agency initiative. It was more of a idea and something that really I decided I wanted to see if I could move forward with. It wasn't something that I had a lot of time for, but it did seem to make sense. And really, moving this project forward became a hobby to me. Some people go home and read or go home and play golf. I was going home and doing eTranscripts work. So I don't necessarily recommend that approach, but it has been successful in Kentucky. So as we start any project, what we do is we ask 4 questions. Can we? And the answer to that was yes, we can do this. Should we? It made sense. It was kind of a no-brainer to move us forward on this. How much? We knew how much it was going to cost us, and so our final question was who pays. So I had those answers to the first 3 questions, but I had to get that last question answered. So the next part of the phase was really me going with my handout. We always had the fallback of it being a student pay model, and Parchment's solution to that was good. We just hoped we wouldn't have to put that in place. We were hoping to find state funding for that. So what I did is I went to each of the 3 state agencies that were participating in this work, and really with my hand out and said, come on, can you all come up with some money for this? And we find that that's the disadvantage of a grassroots effort, is when you're working at that level, it's really hard to get anybody to say yes to the money. So we really had to escalate that up to the commissioner. And Dr. Holliday here in Kentucky was able to pull the 3 agencies together for those discussions to occur. And ultimately, we agreed to split the cost of the project 3 ways for a 5-year contract. So that's what we've got in place now, and that's what we've moved forward with. So Kentucky did opt to start with the basic service since post-secondary schools weren't ready for the XML. It was easier to sell because of the lower cost model. Kentucky's contract with Infinite Campus, and Infinite Campus does contract with Parchment. So if you've got questions about contracting directly with Parchment or an RFP, I'm not going to be the best source for answers on that, because we did not have to go through that. Our 5-year contract does cover both public and private high schools. We do have an MOU between the 3 agencies, and the Kentucky Department of Education does not pay for the private high schools. Our Kentucky Higher Education Assistance Authority pays for the private high schools. So there's they pay a little bit more than a third to cover that group. So students can send transcripts to any Parchment institution for free. All Kentucky post-secondary universities and colleges do participate, so students have a seamless process for delivering transcripts and actually tracking their transcripts. It's a good solution for the students. If you kind of look at our timeline, and I know I talked about, if you can remember earlier, that the presentation I originally saw was in, I think, December of 2011, and it was really 2012 before we started reaching out, probably about June of 2012 before we started reaching out to the different areas to find out if they felt like it would be something of interest. So it was about a year ago that we really kicked off the project in full steam and got all the agencies to say they were interested and would pay. So I think it came early in 2013, so that we actually got all that in place. So we did have the memorandum of understanding between 3 agencies and a contract in place with Infinite Campus for the Parchment solution. At that point, we were really ready to start the implementation phase. It was important to have universities and colleges on board before the high schools. And the reason we took that approach and to get the post-secondaries on board is that, again, I had to make sure the post-secondaries were going to accept this transcript and accept the process so that I could ensure the high schools that I wanted to sign up for, that they were going to have one solution and not multiple solutions. So we did a lot of outreach to post-secondary schools. And we were able to say that we had 100% participation of the Kentucky post-secondary schools by the time we went live July 1st. So that really helped sell this and get the high schools willing to sign up to go live by being able to say that all the colleges and the universities were accepting the transcript. So we had a group of high schools that had volunteered to be part of the pilot. They were really the first to go live. We expected to be ready for the pilot in early 2013, but developing the common transcript took a little bit more time than we had expected it to take. Kentucky took some approaches that were a little bit different than other states or other districts had taken, so we had to make some changes within both Infinite Campus and Parchment. But that process went through pretty smoothly. It was just a matter of making sure that we did that and tested those items out. So by the spring of 2013, Kentucky was ready for the small pilot for final transcripts. The pilot allowed for determining best practices and creating documentation to help with the project as the project did roll out to all districts. So we opened up in late spring, about the end of last school year, a solution through, not solution, but a registration portal through Parchment. And in that registration, districts had the opportunity to select the month they wanted to go live for. We opened up the option for them to go live anywhere from July through March. So July 2013 through March 2014. That was our 9-month window we gave. We really, with the intent that we would have all final transcripts in Kentucky and for the 2013-14 year would be through this solution. We were pleased to be able to say that our largest high school in Kentucky went first. They went live in July of 2013, and we had all of our districts registered to go live within a few months. And right now we're still working through the last few months. If you looked at that slide when we were early on the process, you could kind of see as you get that presentation. I can go back there if I don't make you all sick going there. This is where we are today. We are all the green. Green is good. We have a few that are either in the process of transitioning or they're running a little bit behind, but nothing of great concern. But you can see our state is quickly becoming the color green we want it to be, where it's all the darker green. So we feel really good about the way we're progressing on this. Sorry to go back and forth on y'all.
I have a question. There's a question for you, Dede.
Okay.
The question actually pertains to funding. And the question was, did any of the state agencies have to obtain legislative approval in order to have the funding available to contribute to the initiative?
No, they did not. Now, it would, if we had been in the cycle of a legislative session, we may have opted to just take it there and say, well, can we get legislative funding to pay for the whole thing? But at the time we were working on that, we were not in a legislative session that we were going to be able to get money allocated or anything like that. So we did it with existing funds.
And just one more question, Dede, as it relates to the rollout. As you've been rolling it out to the high school guidance counselors, have your training sessions been a combination of on-site and virtual? Have you done train the trainer? What have you found to work best with your high school administrators?
Initially, for the July rollout, and Jefferson County is our biggest school district, Parchment came in to the state and actually did training, did a couple days of training for those counselors. It was done in a big room. It was very successful, a lot of feedback back and forth. But with the exception of that, our training model has been online training. Parchment has actually reached out to each of our districts on our behalf, and as the schedule comes near, they reach out to the contacts that were set up the original registration process, and they schedule training for the counselors, and the counselors participate in that online training. It takes about an hour. It's not a difficult process, and we've got great feedback from those training sessions. We do have some materials on our website. If you search on kentucky.education.ky.gov, for that, or education.ky.gov is the website, and just type in eTranscripts, you'll see our webpage on there, some additional information on setup for Infinite Campus. But we've been able to transition very smoothly without having to do a lot of on-site, boots-on-the-ground type of training. We've gotten used to this type of training approach. We've done some link sessions that if, for those rare occurrences we have difficulties with a district understanding something, we're able to share screens and do some of that. But those have been rare. Most of it's been able to be handled just through the direct training online.
Great, thank you.
So the high school student experience, and I pretended like I was a student because I got 2 students. So I did this based on through testing a number of students, but for my own kids. And it is a very simple process. Whether you're still in school or you're already a graduate, the process is very similar. The students really just go online. They have the option of going online 24/7, which is great for them because it's whenever they decide they want to do it. The whole process is student initiated. The school doesn't generate any transcripts until the student initiates it. And I think we had some practices here from the post-secondaries that some schools would just they would send all their transcripts to the college that was down the road, for instance. And we don't do that. It's got to be student initiated. And the request is all done online. The process is very simple. Students go online, they register, and once they register, they just log in. They select the school that they're attending, or their high school if they've already graduated that they did attend. They provide consent and indicate which colleges and universities they want the transcripts to go to. There's no limit to how many they can choose. We do encourage them not to just choose at every school. And students or parents can go online and do the process the same way. It doesn't matter which. This solution eliminates the need for scheduled time in the counselor's office, waiting in line to pick up a transcript, losing the transcript, all those. They really have the capability of being able to track their transcript from the time they request it till the time it's delivered to the college or university. They also get email updates as it progresses too, so even if they don't go back online to track it, they have the way of tracking it through email too. Schools do have the option of simplifying the registration process even further if they choose to upload their rosters. If they upload their rosters, they can include email addresses, and if they include email addresses, they can actually communicate registration numbers and information out from the Parchment site directly to their students. So that's been a very attractive feature for a lot of our schools. And using the registration numbers does also provide them with some additional tracking where they can see what students have registered or what students have sent transcripts, what students maybe haven't sent transcripts, so that they can really follow up with those that maybe haven't to encourage them to do what they need to do to advance their educational opportunities. So once the student does request a transcript, the next phase comes into the high school guidance counselor's office. The school can see all pending, and the screenshots here are small, but they're very clear and to the point for those using them. Schools can see all the pending transcripts request online, and they can choose to approve all, or they could choose to approve individually and maybe hold some of the transcripts. And one reason they might want to hold it is if they know grades are going to post the next week. Rather than release transcripts twice, you might just want to hold it until grades are posted and then release them after that. Or there could be some fines that are in place and the student knows that they don't want to release transcripts for them. So it does give them options. The student or parent requester is notified as the school does releases this, so they keep that in mind. They will, once they've requested the release in Parchment site, with the solution, the setup that we have here with Infinite Campus is they will actually go into the Infinite Campus site and they will choose the students to actually release those students to Parchment. And the process does generate an XML file that goes to Parchment real time, and the information is available there for Parchment to release. The school does have the option of updating additional documents. They can, letters of reference or anything like that that they would want to include with the student's transcript, they can add that information to. So if the school generates a transcript record and it wasn't requested by the student, Parchment will ignore it. It doesn't get loaded to their system or anything like that. There has to be that match up to the original student's request. But once the school has released the transcript, they can go out into the Parchment site and they can see the tracking. They can actually go and look at the transcript that was submitted. They also have a dashboard of information that shows the number of students that have had transcripts and how many and all that kind of information that they can get to from a dashboard, which is very attractive to the high schools because they really have much better capability of seeing what's happening and where their students are going with this analytics that's available.
Dede, this is Len, and this is actually my question, so selfishly as the moderator, I can ask you directly. Of your high school administrators, what's the thing that they said to you that you've heard most frequently? They're like, I really like this because of X. When they say, thank goodness, I can finally do this. Is there one thing that you hear, whether it's a large district like Jefferson County or a smaller one like Boyle? What is that?
I think it's the simplicity and also the fact that they can do it as they have the time to do it versus a student standing in line. They can come in the morning. I remember, in some of the training they said, okay, you can, come in, get your cup of coffee, and you can log in and see what transcripts, and you can do it right then and get it done with for the day. It's really, you put it on their schedule versus having kids coming in and out. It allows them time to spend more time with the kids that really need it versus the kids that just need a transcript and know exactly what they need to do.
And speaking of needing a transcript, there's actually a question I just received that what is the process for previous students or, in particular, previous graduates of the high school? So are you running two process, or how do you address that individual?
We leave that up to the school. It's funny because we have one, my assistant director here, she went in and did hers, and she's been out of school longer than I have, so that's all I'll say. but she requested a transcript thinking she'd never get anything, and she actually got her transcript delivered to her, and it was through Parchment. So she was very surprised because it wasn't through the automated Infinite Campus solution. So it's really up to the school, but most schools, as long as they have the information on Infinite Campus, they're going ahead and doing prior graduates. We've had Infinite Campus in place for 5 years now, so we can go back that far. School the size of Jefferson County, they already had a process set up where a different part of the district handled transcripts for graduates, and they opted this year to stay with that process to where they were only going to do the transcripts for new graduates or students students that were still graduating in this 2014. So it does vary, and we've not been strict on that.
Now that's helpful, and I know that you might have mentioned this in a previous slide, but the question is, how much does a transcript cost for the student, and is there any assistance or waivers for low-income students?
For Kentucky, it doesn't cost a student anything as long as they're sending it to a Parchment school. But if they would be sending it to an out-of-state school that did not participate with Parchment, there is a small charge. It can be waived if they are a low-income student. If they're a low-income student, then they can have up to 4 waivers of charges, and that does need to go through their counselor's office.
And I think also you mentioned students can send as many transcripts as they want, though you don't encourage it. You want them to send it to appropriate places, but they do have you have enabled that capability for current students.
Right, and the reason I say we encourage that is that's one of the things I've heard as far as feedback from our universities. Mm-hmm. They're a little bit fearful that they'll get a lot of transcripts from students where they never get the applications, and that's kind of a waste of their time. They haven't seen it happen yet, but that was one of their initial fears, is that if we made it so easy on students, they would just start to send it to everybody, and if they don't have an application to match it to, they don't load it, so it goes into I think one of the universities called it an orphan file.
And my last question for you before going to this next slide is, the students are actually sending transcripts both electronically and via paper, or are they sending transcripts electronically?
They're sending the transcripts electronically, but it does go to the post-secondary schools in a PDF. And the post-secondary school does download those PDFs, and they're still entering that data. The next phase will be automation of that upload process for the post-secondary schools so that they don't have to do that data entry. But that's what we saw the benefits of that originally, and we still do. It's just that what we heard from our schools is even if you do this, we're 18 months out just being able to get the programming resources that we would need. So that's why we did not tackle that at the very beginning.
Thank you.
All right. Once we have, your question kind of led us into this next slide very well. Really, the information does go to the colleges. They get the files, and one of the downsides of the solution that Kentucky had in place before we went with the Parchment solution was that you had to actually go in and download transcript by transcript. What they found very attractive to this is they could go down and just batch them and download all of them at one time. And again, one of the benefits for the post-secondary schools is once they do that, they're all in the same format. They're used to seeing the transcripts in one standard format, and it makes it much easier for them to work with those as they're putting that information into their systems. Elle, did you want to say anything on this slide?
No, I would just, when we get to the next slide, there's a couple of differentiators between the two services, but this is great. Thank you.
All right. So really, they have the library. They can see the transcripts. If a student calls in, they can see exactly where it is. And like I said before, it did create a lot of efficiencies for the student being able to track where their transcript was and the fact that it actually had been received by the college without having to call the college to find that out.
Dede, As you transition to the slide, from the post-secondary, they are a key partner in this, and just based upon the poll, was there one thing that the post-secondary, were they clamoring to, saying, the most important thing for us is to receive transcripts electronically, or did they say, we want to receive electronically via PDF, but eventually we need data, we need to automate it? What were the key, demands that you heard?
What I heard is that they wanted, especially when I started with the universities, they saw the benefit in going to a fully automated solution. But what they were up against is being able to get programming resources assigned to them. So they saw the initial benefit of just going to a PDF in a standard format to be very attractive to them. And they, like I said, I met with them a couple weeks ago, and this is the 8 public universities. And, they're still thanking me for making this happen. It's been, we're not completely there yet. We don't have all the schools on board, but the difference, they're already seeing the difference it's making in their offices.
Thank you.
Going into, and this is another good lead-in for this slide, we saw the extra benefits for the premium services. But if you all remember, I was going out with my hand out, and it was empty, trying to find money to pay for a service that wasn't really on anybody's radar as far as budget goes. So we opted to go with the received service initially, and the way we look at it, we really feel like we laid the foundation for this work, and that can be built on from here. And our post-secondary agency, the Council on Post-Secondary Education, they're continuing to work on fully automating the solution to meet additional needs of those other colleges and universities that they support. So, lessons learned. Any project you have lessons learned, and we have our fair share of these. Really, I can't stress enough to lay out your expectations and being very clear on deliverables. Our expectations were always a Kentucky Common Transcript, but we struggled with that one probably more than anything. We're there, we're happy with what we've got, but that was our expectations. We told our schools and districts that they could have, a Kentucky transcript that met our needs. So we really worked hard to make that happen. So, and other thing is don't let delays get the project off track. Escalate issues before the project timeline was in jeopardy. We didn't have a have-to timeline, but we always knew that we wanted to have final transcripts go out to the pilot schools at the end of the 2011-12 year, and we wanted final transcripts to go out for all high schools for the 13-14 year. And I'm pleased to be able to say that we have made that happen, or we'll make that happen. The other thing I can't stress enough is a good project manager. We have a great project manager in Tammy Baden at Parchment. It's got to be somebody that's not just tracking, but is part of your team. And we look at all of our vendors in Kentucky as part of our team. They're extensions of our own groups, so we work very closely with them. And we need that person to go above and beyond the just tracking to making it happen. And she's really done that for us. And we wouldn't be where we are today without her hard work. State does need a point person or a team, someone to follow up with schools, send reminders, monitor progress. I'm not above peer pressure. I send out these maps. That map I showed you all earlier is something we started with when we were getting districts to register. And if they were registered, they were green, they were good. If they weren't, they were red. And the power of a little bit of those kind of things being put out does help move things forward. I send a lot of reminders out. I would look at Kentucky in our timeline it's taken us. It did not have to take this long, but you really need a really strong team. We did this by a very small team of people making this happen and doing it on top of a lot of other things. So I think the timeline that Kentucky took could be scaled back quite a bit, and it could be something that would roll out much quicker. The automation and the integration is all there. That's not the hard part. It's just making sure that you've got your schools and your on board, and you have your contracts in place, and then it's really full steam ahead. If you're trying to make eTranscripts happen in your state, I encourage you to think beyond just your own agency. It's hard to get money for all of us at this point, but who benefits? Look at who benefits. The students do benefit from this. So the student pay model is not necessarily a bad model. We were willing to go that direction in Kentucky if we had to, but there are possibly other education agencies that may see that they may see the benefit also, like they did in Kentucky, and be willing to share the cost. And again, the student pay option, I want to stress again, we mentioned this earlier, but if you're worried about your low-income students not being able to afford this, there are waivers that Parchment offers for those students. So it's not, the nominal charge is far less than what they're having to pay to get their ACT scores out and all that. So it's not a fee you should shy away from by any means. And then one of the things we'd want to, we feel strongly about is you really need to have that standing committee that helps provide the advisory capacity to the state agencies to kind of make sure that you're staying on track as things change. Continuous improvement and changes all need to be thought through, and they need to be thought through with the people that are going to be impacted the most, and that's going to be your schools and your students. And the ACT is one that's recently come up for us. Contract changes necessitate us taking another look at how those scores display on the transcripts. So there are going to be things that come up like that. There's going to be lessons learned, and the ability to actually talk those through with your advisory groups is really helpful, we found. I'm going to turn it over to Elle at this point, unless somebody has questions for me before we go any further.
There is another question out there, Dede. I will read it off, but then I will answer it, and you'll see why. The question is, under the Kentucky agreement with Parchment, will there be a cost to the post-secondary institutions when you transition to premium receive? And if so, is KIA planning on subsidizing that for all public and private post-secondary institutions in the state? To the individual that asked the question, there is a charge for premium receive, and that Parchment has been in discussion with one of the agencies that Dede mentioned in order for them to determine, are they going to pay for everything in the entirety, or are they going to subsidize and pass on some of the expense onto the institutions? That has not been determined or finalized. Dede, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything further.
No, I've not been as involved as much in that, so I don't think I'd have anything to add on that. I think you covered it well.
Thank you, and thank you to the individual who asked the question. And Elle, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, great. Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, Dede, and good afternoon, everyone. To conclude today's presentation, we wanted to provide a quick overview on Parchment. Simply put, Parchment provides our partners with a platform to send and receive eTranscripts. Here we have highlighted the area where Kentucky is focused, which as Dede described is the sending of eTranscripts from high schools to colleges. Additionally, Parchment provides its post-secondary partners with the ability to send eTranscripts from college to college and college to employer. I ask that everyone forgive me as there's a lot of information on this slide, but there are two areas I really want to focus on. First, along with Kentucky, we have 10 statewide partnerships that vary in scope and approach. Like Kentucky, many of our state partnerships are focused on high school sending to colleges. We also have many partners like the states of Pennsylvania and South Carolina, where our partnership supports their P20 initiatives. Second, we are partnered with other leading vendors in education. Vendors many of you have selected, like SIS leaders, Infinite Campus, Ellucian, and Oracle. Also, since we are solely focused on eTranscript exchange, organizations like the NCAA and GED selected Parchment as their sole partner for eTranscript exchange. Ultimately, we've invested in these partnerships to automate the sending and receiving of eTranscripts. And knowing that we are running close on time here, I would like to personally thank everyone for their participation, and of course Dede for her time today in today's webinar. And I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Len.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Dede. And as the questions start coming in, there are a few additional questions that we have out there that I want to ask to both of you. Dede, you talked about what resonated with the colleges, but was it the same thing? You mentioned that there are four-year institutions, but obviously in Kentucky there are community colleges. Did you notice a difference in the want from your post-secondary institutions? And if so, did you need to sell that differently, or was that then, did the state agency then really work with those individual verticals, and that then helped you out?
The Council on Post-Secondary Education did help a lot with reaching out to all the post-secondary schools. But I worked with enough of them that I realized that there was differences in whether they felt like they would ever get to the premium type level of services. Not everybody's going to be willing to, have the programming resources or have the system that's compatible with that. But the standard transcript and the electronic process that was available 24/7 and the ability to track really was what was the selling point to all the schools I talked to, regardless of small, large, anything.
We've talked about the student process, but we've talked about the administrative process. Candidly, going back to the students, what has been their reaction? Was training conducted for them, or as soon as the districts put a link on, as the students adopted? Are there any lessons learned there as a way to communicate this to the students?
Well, Parchment has a lot of materials that they made available to us for providing out to the schools, and they actually provided those directly to the schools. They work with the schools to provide posters and training materials and all that. And really the solution that schools found most attractive was being able to upload their email addresses and actually communicate out with the schools through Parchment, and be able to get that information out there, and then pulling those seniors together and just saying, all you need to do is go out and click on this link. You're already out there, register and do it. And it was so simple that there didn't have to be a lot of training. And we've already done 15,000 transcripts, so I think it's not like they're not using it.
Correct. Are there plans to analyze or aggregate the transcript data at your agency's level?
Yes, we'll continue to evaluate the transcripts. Our next step is really to look at the number of transcripts going out compared to the senior class. We know there's more than just senior transcripts that go out, but trying to get a feel for how many transcripts are going out. Parchment has some good reporting that is available to us, so we look forward to seeing that. Our focus just right now has been getting all of the schools on board.
I think the individual, let me try to ask a little bit differently. The transcript contains quite a bit of data within it. Are there any plans to look at the data within a transcript and extract it, I believe, and then from there do some additional analysis as it relates to college and career progression?
Right. We are already doing that. Because we have the benefit of having a statewide student information system, we already had access to all that data with or without the transcript solution. So we can pull all that out of our state SIS. So where I would see some states would really benefit from being able to have all that in one place, we're fortunate to already have that.
Great, thank you. And with 1 minute to go, I'm going to leave the lines open just for a few more minutes, but want to be sensitive to everyone's time. As the final questions are coming in, I want to not only thank both of our presenters today, but both of our presenters have been kind enough to provide their contact information to today's audience. So should you have any additional questions that you'd like to ask either Dede or Elle, please feel free to contact them directly. Again, Their information is presented on the screen within today's presentation screen. Lastly, all of today's attendees will receive a follow-up email from Parchment with access to today's webinar, and that webinar will be in a recording format and something that you will have access to and can download. If you require any further information as it relates to the logistics of today's webinar, please feel free to contact me. My contact information is the last one on the screen, and that is nap@parchment.com. Seeing that there are no further questions, and we are at the top of the hour, first and foremost to our presenters, we want to thank them for an engaging and thoughtful discussion, and to today's participants for their thoughtful questions. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful week.
Thank you.